A woman also needs to be able to complement his leadership. So, meaning being a help to him making the decision rather than a hurt to it. And that includes even if his decision might not be exactly what she thinks would be the right thing. What will allow you to handle these conflicts effectively? Everything to do with you right up here. And then the second part of that is selection, meaning, did you pick a partner who's going to be healthy and effective most of the time, or is she going to be ineffective and unhealthy? And if she's ineffective and unhealthy, can you work to change that? Meaning, really, she changes herself, but you have to support her in that change, maybe lead her to it. Or is it unchangeable, unfixable? If it's unfixable, you need to just exit. You can't be in a long-term relationship with somebody who cannot handle conflict effectively. Period. Now that doesn't mean that her way of handling certain things is going to always be identical to yours, but it has to be effective and it has to be healthy. And so if she's not healthy or effective, we're talking most of the time. Everyone's going to have those situations where they're not always good, right? But if they're not at least good, like, we'll say 80-20, right? 80% of the time, if they're not handling conflict in a healthy way, then it either has to change or it can't keep going. Because what will happen is she will devalue you in her mind until she resents you, and the balance in her mind of desire versus resentment or devaluation is so thrown off that she doesn't see you as someone she can be with. Either you're the alpha guy that she has to leave because you're a terrible person, which you may not even be a terrible person, but she's going to see that way, present you that way, look at every fault, everything you've done from a negative bias, because that magic ratio is off, and it was off for so long. And now she sees everything, including you, your character, your value, in a negative light. She is desiring you. If you're the alpha guy, she'll desire you, but she'll leave you. Okay. She'll leave you with desire, and then that may lead to resentment and anger. And she will bring a wrath on you like nothing else, because she will see herself as the victim and as you, the bad person who victimized her, because she desired you and wanted it to work. But because you're such a terrible person, it couldn't work. But you're not a terrible person. It's just she sees it in a negative bias. Well, it has to do with the way you're handling conflict, but the way that you're handling conflict and the reasons for not handling it better, it could be her problem. If she is the problem, you can't fix her. Ladies, if he is the problem, you can't fix him. So either you work on fixing and being patient so the other person can fix themselves and do better. But if the other person can't do better, it doesn't get better, and there is no recognition of needing to do better, that's the big part of it. If a guy or the girl doesn't recognize that there's a problem and that changes need to be made, then that demonstrates incapability. So the person's not capable of making change. Anybody who does not recognize that there's a problem, cannot see the problem, and will not make those changes is demonstrating that they're not capable. Whether they're capable in a year or two or not, it doesn't matter. Okay. Right now in the current, they're not. And so if they're not capable, you need to consider leaving that situation once you've determined that. If they are capable, they're going to recognize the problems, own it, and start making and taking measures to fix it. They may not know how to fix it, but they're going to put the effort towards that and trying to figure that out. And so that's how you know. But in any sense, if she is not capable or healthy, it can't have healthy conflict. It's not going to work, right? And if you are not healthy or capable, then it's not going to work. And it has to do with what you got here, your emotional mastery, okay? Having mastery over your emotions and having self-awareness. I'm going to put a caveat down, which is watch for people, particularly women will do this a lot, where they use manipulation through victimhood. I see this with guys too. So quite honestly, this goes both ways, really. Is that so she can do something that is triggering a negative emotional response. She knows it. Sometimes maybe she doesn't know it, but she may know it. And she does this to trigger a negative response. And then you have a negative emotional response. And then she acts like you're inadequate as a person due to your lack of emotional self control. And that's why I say women a lot of times, because if they're usually the thing that a submissive or the least powerful will do, but it's a very, very sinister way of manipulating. It's intentionally or doing things and saying things that may seem innocuous even to general public. So she could say something that is a little disrespectful that seems like it's only like it would have just sort of gone over everybody's head, but it was a bit disrespectful, right? And it could have been adding up to several different behaviors leading up to that little bit of disrespect. And then let's say you then react to that disrespect. And then everybody else looks at you like you're crazy because you reacted a certain way. It's a very deep form of manipulation. Okay. And you need to be aware that this could be a thing. All right. And having emotional mastery and self awareness is what is going to allow you to see this for what it is. It's trying to make you out to be the bad chimpanzee or bad person or the crazy person. It's doing things intentionally that, whether it's right or not right, they know is going to trigger you to have a conflict with them, right? And so they do it in order to trigger that response, and then they get to have power over you by saying you're inadequate because you're so unreasonable, you lack emotional self-control, maybe you're weak, or maybe you're crazy as a woman, right? All of the covert, because they sound like you're criticizing behaviors, but you're really criticizing the person. Covert criticisms now come out, which is criticism is a destructive, toxic conflict handling method. All right. Where you criticize that person, devalue the person. So all of those things come out. And those things came out because they were triggered by her doing something intentionally to trigger that. If you find yourself doing this, like, well, she doesn't like this, but I'm going to do it anyway, don't do those things. It's unhealthy. All right. And if someone else is doing it to you, you have to recognize it, because it's an attempt to have power over you in a toxic and unhealthy and non-consensual way, really, right? It's to be the victim from your behavior. Oh, you're yelling at me, you're getting mad at me, or you made a scene in front of everybody, you walked out of the argument, or you kicked the door when you left and got angry with me, or you yelled or raised your voice, like whatever. But they're doing things to cause that behavior. Now, how do you combat that? Emotional self-control and emotional mastery is how. So you don't react to that in an unreasonable way. That's how. Okay. But understand, okay, you women that do this, because it's usually women. If the guy reacts in a way that's unreasonable, but because you are triggering that behavior, you need to take some responsibility for that. That doesn't mean that he's reacting perfectly. But if you or your partner don't react perfectly, that doesn't make you wrong. It just makes you imperfect. Does that make sense? In other words, let's say she says something vague and ambiguous about some ex-boyfriend that dropped in the Instagram that implies an attraction, but it's real vague, not quite one way or the other. And she says that in an attempt to, get under his skin, trigger, manipulate him, right? Or maybe she's just being careless and says something that's careless and isn't, and he gets mad and says, well, why don't you, come then if you're that interested or whatever, and gets angry, you know what I mean? And storms, leaves the room, and she has this like an elevated reaction, okay, that's not quite reasonable to maybe how she behaved, right? It wasn't like she said, I want to sleep with the guy or whatever, right? Just something that was more ambiguous. She'll sit there and go, he's the jerk, he's this, he's that, he's emotional, right? Like she'll blame him when really she was trying to manipulate because she doesn't want to look like a bad chimp because she had some interaction, let's say on Instagram with an ex that maybe is crossing a boundary. So instead of saying, yeah, I'm crossing a boundary, I'm going to own this, she says or does something that will trigger a bad reaction in the guy. And then she says, see, you're reacting badly. You're unreasonable. You're insecure. You're this, you're that. And so she doesn't have to take responsibility for her action because of his overreaction. You see how that works? Now the conflict becomes about the guy's overreaction rather than her behavior. This is a masking tactic. Okay. So she is masking her behavior by manipulating the situation into a fight or conflict. That doesn't make her right. That makes her manipulative. That makes her toxic. And that means that she's not only all of those things, but she's not handling that conflict appropriately. And so with that, she's going to create a demise in her relationship. So we need to be aware of those tactics, that manipulation tactic in general, and we free ourselves from that with emotional mastery and awareness.